Hey guys, let's talk about 11 things everyone starting the home buying process needs to know. Hey Janice, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Very good. Did you get a chance to read this great article by, I think it was on BuzzFeed, but it's by Quicken Loans?
Yes. Actually, I really like this article. It has a lot of information.
Cool. I think the best way to cover something like this, one of these listicles, is just to fire down their 11 things and sort of chime in with our thoughts on each of them. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Let's take turns. Do you want to take the first one?
Absolutely. That's avoiding making big financial changes right before buying a home. This is big because you get so excited about buying a home that you want to go buy furniture. You want to go buy something else.
Right.
And it's important not to do that right before, at least the minimum the first month, because you don't want any credit fluctuations at all.
There's also other weird, like if you change your job during the closing process, that can mess everything up because they might, the bank might need like a letter from your employer to prove your W-2s or what's another example? Financial changes. Oh, right. If you start moving money around, like let's say, oh, cool, I currently have my money with Chase, but I just found out, I don't know, whatever, Bank of America is giving a better rate. Let me move all my money. If you have all these statements with, wildly fluctuating balances, that could also mess up your underwriting process. Yeah.
Correct. And it's important not to do that. Leave everything alone just as they have it and wait till after.
Cool. Number two, jumping ahead, take the time to get to know the neighborhood. And I think you and I can both offer pretty unique perspectives because I live in Manhattan and you are in a more suburban. Would you consider your area suburban or rural?
Definitely suburban.
Okay. So in the city, I'll give the city take. It's pretty unique because, the neighborhood can change pretty drastically within 1 or 2 blocks, meaning there can be some pretty pish posh, nice neighborhoods, buildings and whatever in one, like on 95th Street. I'm just making this up. This is not, I'm not saying anything about 95th Street, but then you go down to 93rd Street and then it's a little sketchy. And you would think 2 blocks, how can that be? But that's just kind of how it is because everything's compressed in the city. So it's important. The reason this is important is because, if your subway, the commute that you're going to take every day passes through some of those less desirable neighborhoods, or you walk to the grocery or to the bank or whatever, you need to scope those out to make sure you're comfortable with your day-to-day routine.
No, that's very important. And in my area, it's suburban. So it's a little bit different. You have these big developments, but although it's a big development, there's so much more to it. For example, mine in particular, we have an active train. There's 50 to 60 trains that go through our development every day. If you're not here at the right time looking at the house, you're not going to know that. You're not going to know how it sounds from inside the house.
Right.
I don't hear it anymore, but that's something that's pretty important to know in the neighborhood because most of the times you'll see train tracks and nobody uses them anymore, but this one sure does. Another good way to do it is Facebook groups. Most developments now, at least in my area where they're suburban, they have Facebook groups for the particular developments. Those are great because you get on there and they talk about everything. And that's fantastic. They'll talk about, the crime. It says in the article about more renters than homeowners. There are some developments that are mostly renters, even though they look like, single family homes. So that's interesting to keep in mind, especially for down the road if you try to sell again.
Just one more point on this. In the city, I might narrow this down to the building versus the neighborhood. So every building, condo or co-op or whatever apartment that you live in has its kind of its own vibe. It might be more retirees who like it quiet, or it might be really, really just jam-packed with kids or young kids who are like kind of crying all the time. So you need to get a sense of the vibe of the building because it can be close quarters. Yeah.
That's a very good point. And whereas in my area, in suburban, outside of Allentown, we are getting everyone from all the big cities coming in. So ours, I find, is just a big fun melting pot of you have new families, you have older, you have retirees, so it's very interesting. It's not a building, it's a community here in this area.
Cool. Want to take point number 3?
Absolutely. Point to learn the property lines. That's really big, especially in this type of environment, in the suburban, the rural area. Where does your line end? Where does theirs begin? Are you going to want to put up a fence? Parking is a big deal. You can't park. You can't driveway when you're talking about shoveling snow. It's so important to know where your property ends and the next person begins. Get a map, get the original deed, especially if it's a development. The developers have all that information. Go way back and get that information because it's really important.
That's pretty much a non-issue in Manhattan, but in some parts of Brooklyn, Staten Island, even the Bronx and Queens, this can be an issue. So yes, everything you said.
I have seen and heard many neighbor fights over easements, especially when it's legal. You see lots of lawsuits for easements. So it's really important to know. Just look into it.
Cool. Number 4, schools matter, even if you don't have kids. So anyone who might be new to the home buying process, pretty much in most parts of the United States, the school that the public school that you're able to go to is tied to, where you live. It's sort of by districts or zones. And it's also, most parts of the United States, schools are funded by the property taxes paid by the zoned or district residents. So that has a couple of important ramifications. If you want to go to a really, really great school, and you'll have to live in that area, and you'll probably have higher property taxes than in other areas. What can you add, Janice?
No, that's absolutely correct. And when it says, even if you don't have kids, it's important to think of down the road, should you ever want to sell again to a family? Do you live in a good school district? Is it a poor school district, as in poor academic numbers? That will really affect whether that family is going to consider your home or not. But you're correct in the property taxes. Some school districts, especially here, you move one street over, your property taxes are going to be significantly higher for the same ranked school, if that makes sense. So you're going to go to the same school, but your property taxes will be higher. So it's just so much to keep in mind when looking. And all that information is available online.
Yeah, there's a couple of great resources. I think greatschools.org is one, and Inside. I'll have to look these up and throw them onto the notes. But there's a couple of sites. But also, and I know a lot of folks say even if you don't have kids, you want to buy in a good school zone because good school zones will help with the property value no matter what. I want to play devil advocate on that for a second because, schools change too, right? A good school is not going to be a good school forever.
Correct.
And a bad school might become a good school later. But
correct.
It's hard. It's hard to speculate. It's like you're speculating on a school.
Correct. But you can get a general sense, even going back to what I was saying with getting to know the neighborhood and the Facebook groups. You'll hear people talk about the schools all the time. They love the school. They love the teacher. They love how their students doing. That you get a good sense of community and environment when you look at the school as a whole. Is everyone happy, really? And are the test scores, are they good?
Right. Hey, Jay, I'll take this one because I think it's a little bit more up my alley.
Thank you.
Yeah, number 5, buying a foreclosure probably isn't as risky as you think. I'm going to disagree with this one. I have done foreclosures, both as we do estates. So as an executor, I have sold foreclosures and short sales, and I've helped clients also purchase them as part of their planning or wealth building. It's not easy. I think it is. I guess they're saying it's not risky, but I don't think in this article they're taking into account time risk. Like these deals just fall apart, and you've wasted 6 months where you could have been applying that time to purchasing a more likely property to close. So in that regard, I would glaze over this one. I don't believe in this one. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
I don't. I have not ever tried to purchase a foreclosed property, but you hear the stories.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything that it went smoothly.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that doesn't happen. It's just not what I've heard.
I'm not speaking in absolutes. I'm sure easy deals have happened. I'm just, talking about the odds.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. So can you take number 6?
Absolutely. So it is not just, it says make sure you understand all the purchase costs. So when you get your information on your mortgage, you have a number. And that's fantastic, but you also have to think in mind of your down payment is not just what you're going to need to make that number. You have to cover the home inspection, the closing costs. There could be much more than that initial money down that they talk about when you get your mortgage information. So you have to plan ahead. If it's X amount of dollars, you should add more on top of that to be prepared. Better to have too much than not enough.
And the article mentions that you might be required to have a certain amount left over at the end. That's absolutely right. You
Correct.
can't zero out and have zero in all your accounts at the end of the day after you buy your house. They want to see usually. I mean, I don't know about where you're at, but in the city, they want the buildings themselves, not even the lenders. The buildings want to see probably about a year's worth of maintenance in your bank, so that they know that you won't immediately go into default on the, I guess you would call it homeowners associations, but maintenance for the condo.
Correct. Yeah, you do not want to end up paying for everything. You get into your nice, wonderful new house, and then what do? You have nothing. You are starting from scratch with your monthly bills, and like you said, the paying for the property and the maintenance. So it's important to over prepare instead of under prepare.
Cool. Number 7, you don't always need a big down payment. The article saying that conventional wisdom is that you need 20% down, but that no, you can actually buy a house for as low as 5 or 3% down. I'm going to disagree with this, just because I actually agree with the conventional wisdom in this case, that the 20% down payment is not just about qualifying for a conforming loan, but it's also about making sure that your monthly payments are manageable, to avoid things like purchase money, PMI, which is a mortgage insurance. And I don't know. I feel like anything above that is being a little over leveraged. But that's just kind of my 2 cents. What are your thoughts?
I agree, especially when you're talking about what we just said, the 20% down payment. You have to look at your monthly numbers and talk to somebody about it. If putting 5% down puts you in a bind every month, that's not a good idea. Yeah. So you're going to want to, right? You're going to want to put that 20% down if it makes your monthly payments more manageable once you take everything into account, which we'll talk about shortly.
Cool. Can you take, or actually, I'll take number 8. Actually, no, you should take it because home inspections is really not a city thing.
Correct. It is really big where we live. Again, we have some older houses, some newer houses. It is so important. It says you won't regret a home inspection. 100% true. Very rarely have I seen that they don't do a home inspection, because when you're walking through, you're excited. You're like, wow, I'm going to live here. But you're not looking at the electrical, the plumbing, the roof, all the little things that could become a problem from the minute you walk in till 10 years later. So it's just so important.
So the funny thing is, in Manhattan, when you're buying into a condo or a co-op apartment building, there's pretty much not much going on with physical inspections. There's a little bit with HVAC units and windows, but what you're really looking at is the building's financials. Because a poorly run building, both from the wear and tear perspective, but more importantly, if it's run poorly financially, that could really put a hammer on the quality of your property investment. So that's really what people look into a lot more. There's a whole due diligence period looking at the books of the building.
I find it fascinating that it's so different when you purchase in a city versus outside of the city.
Seriously,
it's fascinating.
Okay, number 9. Keep your monthly payment in mind. And Janice, you talked about this. This is huge. I mean, people seem to, a lot of folks approach the home buying process with, my budget is, I'm just going to pull a number out of thin air. My budget is $500,000. My budget is $300,000. My budget is $1 million. But I think the better way to approach it is, my budget is $3,000 per month. And different types of properties, different priced properties can fit into that depending on the property tax, the homeowners associations, the condo fees. And it really should be, what can I afford per month? Because the purchase price is just one variable. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'd like to elaborate on this one a little bit because I find it to be so important. So you have a monthly payment. You think it'll be, like you said, $3,000. But you have to keep in mind, the taxes, the insurance, etc. The important parts of it's not just $3,000. There's other things on top of it. I have found, and this is personal, doesn't work for everybody. We opened an account that was strictly for our monthly payment. We knew how much had to go in there every month to cover the mortgage, the insurance, the taxes, and everything. And we figured out, based on how much we make a week, how much we had to put per week into that account. So we know every month that it is covered. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? Because you miss 1 month of your mortgage, that's detrimental to your credit.
Bye-bye credit.
Right. And when when you're thinking $3,000 a month is what I have to save up, and you have everything all in one big pot, you look at this pot and go, wow, I have $2,900. I'll go buy a grill, but not thinking that in 2 days your mortgage is due. It's $3,000. So how are you going to come up with the other 200? So that's just something that really just worked for us. But it was just great. You never have to think about, will my mortgage and everything be paid?
That's cool. So your system is to just have an account where you're always sure that balance is met.
Yes.
To cover. That's interesting. Cool.
Absolutely. But we knew when we purchased the house how much we could afford, and we stayed within that. So we weren't ever stretched. So it's just important to make sure that your monthly payment is what you can afford, and that you are actually being able to pay it each month.
Right on. Number 10. I'll take this one. Be emotionally prepared to negotiate. I think most people don't, find discomfort in negotiating. So this is kind of a tough piece of advice. Most people find it hard to negotiate their salary. Most people find it hard to negotiate even, their car purchase. And that's why the other side usually gets a better side of the deal for me in most cases.
I agree. I am not a negotiator, and I will be the first to admit that it's hard.
So I don't think that you can just kind of casually say, hey, do a good job of negotiating. I think there's a lot of psychology and prep that a lot of folks need to do to mentally prepare themselves for this and other areas of their life. So I think it might be a little flippant to just say, hey, do a good job of negotiating.
It's hard. It's very hard. Like I said, the first line, negotiating is difficult. Yeah. Absolutely. It is very hard. Very
good. And okay, so the last one is a little cliche, so I don't want to talk about it. Why don't you take it?
Just don't lose sight of the big picture. It says, don't get hung up on superficial details like staging and paint color.
Right, true.
It is pretty superficial. It goes back to you walk in, it looks beautiful, you're excited, but you really have to keep in mind how much can you pay per month. Mm-hmm. And again, don't look at the paint colors, get the home inspection. What's behind the paint? You don't know. So yeah, that's great. Don't look at the superficial stuff, but you really have to look at the other more important things before you make your purchase.
And I'll add, when it says don't lose sight of the big picture, I mean, if you fall in love with a home, that's the most beautiful apartment or house or whatever, but it's such a stretch on your budget that it's emotionally stressing you and your family out for the next 30 years, it's probably not worth it.
Absolutely. It's better to stay within your budget, maybe have it a little bit smaller than you'd like, but to know you're going to be comfortable each month.
Cool. Thanks, Janice. That was fun. Just to remind everyone, or remind you, Jay, the reason I'm talking about these homeowner or home buying tips is because I'm just a few weeks away from publishing my own guide on how to buy your perfect home. That'll be out on Amazon in a few weeks, and I'll make sure everyone on the email list gets a copy of that.
Oh, fantastic.
Cool. Thanks, Jay. Let's talk again soon.
Thank you. We'll chat soon.
Bye.